Does everyone know what design thinking is? Hands up if you don't know what design thinking is. Okay, so Doug will talk a little bit about that in a second, but he's one of, I think, 60 people in the world recognized for being right up there in design thinking, which is a really important part of, I guess, consulting methodology today and transformation approach. Doug is a co-founder of IBM Group and has worked with Jeff for how many years now? How many years have you been working together?
4 years, yeah.
Yeah, they've written together, they've spoken together, they've done all sorts of things, and I love hanging out with them. Please put your hands together for Doug.
Thank you, Dan, for those kind words and certainly putting me on the spot. I wasn't really going to talk about design thinking.
I know, just a word about what it is.
But I'll weave it in somehow. But really wonderful to be here today, and thank you. Oak, I must admit, you brought back fond memories. In 2011, I was blessed to spend most of the year at Duke University doing my executive program, and I was with many of your colleagues from the Navy, the US Navy. And
the dark side.
Well, they spoke very fondly of you. But it was really wonderful to listen to their leadership cadre and philosophies which are very closely aligned. They did talk about the Army-Navy football games and rivalry at length. But yeah, really wonderful. Today I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about something Dan spoke of storytelling, and this picture behind us here is actually a picture of the Sand People. And this is one of the oldest cultures in the world. They were based in Africa, and they still are based there. And what you'll see in many of the caves in some of these locations in which they've lived for many hundreds of years is an evidence of what life has meant to them over these periods in the formation of oil paintings in the caves. And fire has always been an important part of their life. It is an important part to this day in terms of the ritual of actually having an opportunity to engage as a community in the evenings, to talk to each other in meaningful ways, to share stories in meaningful ways. And so I thought no better example of saying, how do we light the fire in our hearts through trust than looking at one of the oldest civilizations in the world. And so I want to take you through a bit of a journey that I was blessed to be part of many years ago. I was an executive in one of the big banks in Africa, and we had a project that was called Area Collaboration. It spanned 22,000 staff, 6 million customers. So from your institutional corporate investment banking customers to your commercial, family-owned businesses to your retail customers, every single customer segment was represented. Our philosophy at that time was to say, how do we as a bank and a financial institution hunt as one instead of in our individual silos of the retail bank, the commercial bank, the wealth business, and the corporate investment bank. And so we embarked on a program where we actually geographically, divided the country up in what we called micro markets, and we created 216 of these micro markets. So, you talk about community. We started to group our clients into logical communities from a geographical point of view, and the intention was that we had localized teams that were represented from all our silo businesses, from the corporate investment bank right through to the retail bank, that worked in unpacking and collaborating together. How do we unlock the greatness in those communities, and of course, improve the financial returns and things like that. When I came in to take over the project, it was failing. And so the first thing I did was, clearly a sizable project like this is to just go and have meaningful conversations with our teams. And I was really blessed to have a great leadership team that supported me from across these various silos. And it was very evident that what we were seeing was really I would call an autocratic, top-down process, all about the outputs, all about the financial returns. So we had these regional collaboration leadership meetings, and we would engage with the leadership teams and understand what was happening. They were pretty much about the output. So what did you achieve? What's your leads? How much money did we make extra this month? And clearly that was, just beating the same old drum, unfortunately. And I could see it in the eyes of our teams that they didn't really have the buy-in. They didn't really understand, well, Dan, coming back to your point, and I think Oak, you raised it as well, is what's my part in this? If it's just the financial outcome, then what am I doing this for? And so when we started to have these very authentic and honest conversations, and in some cases very hard conversations, we started to unpack our own belief system as to, well, what we have this mission and this purpose, but what was it beyond that we wanted to achieve? And when we started to have these engagements in meaningful and authentic ways, we started to realize that what we really wanted was we wanted to make a difference in those communities of clients, those communities of staff that are represented in our organization. And so we embarked on changing things. We did a couple of things. We refined our KPIs to be more aligned to driving the right behaviors. When we chaired the collaboration forum meetings, they were never about the outputs. They were always about the inputs. And we started to use a technique that the SAND people use and that many of you have touched on already, of storytelling. The power of storytelling became the evangelism of the culture and the belief system that we wanted to spread, not only to the 22,000 of our people, but to the 6 million customers that we touched out there. And this journey took a lot of work, and we put a lot of enablers, and we empowered our teams on the ground to make decisions. We know that the world that we operate now is very much hierarchical, where strategy is defined at the top. Well, actually, strategy was defined at the bottom because they had the best insights. Why? Because they were closest to the customers. They were closest to those communities in which they operated in and had far greater insights. So we took things like marketing budgets and we said, well, we're not going to determine them at the top. We're going to allocate them to you. Of course, we'll challenge and debate, but you are empowered. And we started to have this philosophy of empowering our teams in the front line, in those clients and in those communities. And we unlocked amazing things. So what was the outcome of this journey of transforming from a autocratic, output-driven process to a process where trust became embedded, where we created a coaching environment and coached the coaches throughout 22,000 people? There's not easy stuff, breaking down internal barriers, let alone going out into the communities. We put all these enablers in place, and over time, in 2.5 years, we changed the entire trajectory of the outcome of the program. So what we really prided ourselves as a team at the time was, always got to measure yourself in terms of what did you achieve. First and foremost, what was amazing was we always prided what we did in the communities, what we did with our people and what we did with our customers and our communities, and making a difference in their lives. And the richness of the storytelling that evangelized, and we had our own fireside conversations in South Africa called braais and barbecues. We had a lot of these, and it evangelized this. So we created a movement. We created a belief of a greater purpose than just financial. And we didn't focus too much on financial with the teams and the engagements. But what was the outcome was we took a business from generating 14 billion of revenue to 18 billion of revenue in 2 years with very little technology. And so, Dan, you speak about design thinking. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to the way we look at solving problems. And what is at the core of design thinking is human empathy, understanding, having engagements, the ability to ask a deeply refined question from your customers, and how to solve that when you start to appreciate their views and perspectives. And so for me, coming back to the SAND people, of the power of storytelling, the power of human-to-human authentic conversations can never be underestimated, and especially in an era that we're facing now where technology is, of course, crowding out our time, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to share that story with you, and it leads me into a second part of my story, which is something I'm really passionate about. As Jeff mentioned, I'm also a co-author of a book on innovation. But following that, I got a little bit bored. I don't think I'm going to get to the 7 books, Jeff, but I got a little bit bored, and I was challenging myself. And never know. But for me, one of the things I'm really excited about and passionate about is executive leadership. And so I collaborated with some really good colleagues around the world a year or so ago in terms of saying, let's think about, what do we see as the key skills and attributes of executive leadership? And so we started to work. We actually started to look at what was out there, and we were really disappointed to see that there wasn't anything as what we thought was more futuristic versus historical. And of course, there's a lot of proxies for great leadership in history, but we felt the future is very different. And so we created a working prototype, and it remains that. It's alive. We sent it to 60 CEOs and chairmen and executives around the world. A couple of that are sitting in this room that gave me some wonderful feedback on that journey, and we continue to get feedback. I'm with an executive coach next week who's got 4 pages of notes on this, which is fantastic. We welcome that. But the thinking behind this was around, at the end of the day, the philosophy of experience and wisdom and trust as the bedrock of leadership. And you could arguably say that there's no executive I can think of that can tick the box on every single one of those, especially the top half of the box. Let me give an example. So you take someone like Steve Jobs. He was a visionary for Apple, and he did fantastic things. But Tim Cook, who's got a PhD in process management, is now the CEO of Apple, is what I would call a strong integrator. And so you look at those slightly different skill sets in terms of what they do. The anomaly is probably Elon Musk, who's probably good at both of those, and that's why he's the wealthiest man in the world. But it is very rare to find someone, again, who can tick all the boxes. But what is important, I think, as we look at executive leadership and leadership in general, is the bottom half of that, in terms of the people, skills, and values that we need to live by. And I think it's that wisdom, and I was experimenting the other day, Dan, you'll be intrigued in this in terms of, the power of AI, and we know AI is massive hype right now. And technology in terms of, I was playing around with an avatar who instead of going the expensive route, and Rodrigo and David, I don't want to take you out of business, but there's an avatar that actually does it all now for you. Where you want to do your digital marketing, you just type in the text and you choose your avatar and pay for an avatar, and it does it all for you, and it produces a wonderful marketing video. And so for me, when we look at the world that we're facing right now, it does come back to this thing that says, yes, technology is important. It is exciting. We must be curious about it. But I think we must never underestimate the importance of human interaction, of the ability to just have a conversation, the ability to walk down the corridor and somebody greets you, instead of looking at your iPhone, you actually put your iPhone away and have a conversation. These are the important things. So I want to leave you with that closing message. Dan is giving me the dirty eye here in terms of my time, but thank you very much, and I look forward to it.